long-term economic growth and global well-being. We're at an opportune time when emerging technologies are going through paradigm shifts and are at the threshold of promising a potential that, if we direct the collective intent and actions towards it, can create a better future. We would also like to emphasize that the G20 nations and the Business 20 group should work together to create mechanisms for collaborations in areas including Industry 4.0, Internet for All, deep and emerging technologies like cancer research, medtech, space tech, mobility, circular economy, green data centers, biomaterials and bioenergy, increase the number of women in STEM-related areas, and human-centered design. One of the key pillars is the promotion of technology, innovation, and R&D through digital platform for global collaboration. This platform will serve as a hub for experts, scientists, and visionaries to share ideas and collectively tackle some of the most pressing challenges we face. Possibilities for breakthrough discoveries are many, opening new avenues for progress. Collaboration between developed and developed economies brings several benefits to the world, to scientific research, to innovation. The reason why many multinational corporations have their R&D centers in a location like India is to leverage the talent that's available in India, to leverage the lower cost economies and the benefit that comes with that, bring diversity of thought, diversity of ideas, diversity of solutions and problem statements to the table, and create affordable solutions that work for the 8 billion people in the world. We truly believe that such a collaboration creates better solutions, affordable solutions, and create an equitable society. There is need for increased public-private funding for R&D activities, especially in sectors with high potential for sustainable innovation, such as renewable energy, clean technology, and healthcare. It is important to also foster collaboration between academia, research institutions, and industry to create an environment of knowledge sharing and cross-disciplinary innovation. G20 nations must also come together to invest in education and training programs that equip the workforce with skills needed for emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and biotechnology. By implementing such interventions, governments, businesses, and organizations can create an environment that fosters innovation, accelerates technology development, and drives mass adoption of sustainable solutions across various industry sectors. To discuss these issues, we have an expert panel with us. Ms. Candace Johnson, co-founder SES, Laurel Teleport Europe, Europe Online, Vice Chair, NOTSAR, and Executive Board Member, International Chamber of Commerce, Luxembourg. Fernando Sestari de Rizzo, Chief Executive Officer, TUPI, Brazil. Nicholas Dirk, Chief Executive Officer, New Academy of Sciences, US. Roshni Nader, Chairperson, HCL Technologies, Co-Chair, B20 Task Force on Digital Transformation. And my co-chair, Baba Kalyani, Chairman and Managing Director, Bharat Forge, India. Now, before we go to the individual panelists, I would like to share with all the B20 Task Force, I would like to share with all that the B20 Task Force on Technology, Innovation, R&D, in its task of creating an environment that encourages G20 nations in the world to pursue solutions that lie beyond the obvious, we created a compendium of innovation projects from the B20 nations, including India. This compendium is a compilation of more than 125 technology projects deployed across G20 countries. I'm happy to share that 62.5% of the entries are not Indian. That means from outside India. And it's meant to serve as a knowledge resource for organizations and governments around the world. The successful projects were shared by the members of the B20 Task Force on Technology Innovation R&D as case studies through an extensive consultative process. Each project describes the technology, product, process, service, or some of all these, its impact, the challenges faced, collaborative models adopted, and the associated SDGs and more. The compendium will serve as a useful guide to ignite new ideas, scale up existing projects, explore collaborative areas, and lead to enabling frameworks and regulations across geographies. Now, with this, I would like to request all panel members to officially release this compendium. So I will also come over. One of our recommendations is that this compendium be refreshed every year as part of the G20 and the B20 process. Now, I'm going to request each of the panelists to share their opening remarks for about 4 to 5 minutes around, of course, technology, innovation, R&D, the need for collaboration, the technologies that they believe will have the maximum impact on the sustainable development goals. So let me invite Candace Johnson to get started. Candace. You can be here.
Dear photographers, can you... And Mars. Chandrayaan! Congratulations, India. You know, I asked the chairman, I said, I can't speak today and not speak about space, because it is truly what you have done. It is the best use case of technology, innovation, and R&D for our planet and for our world today. You know, this reminds me, my dad was working for President Kennedy on the Apollo mission. And when I was 5, I received, in 1957, I received a little Sputnik to put on the Christmas tree. And from then on, I was convinced that space was the, you know, that everything good came from space. And I still do. Now, everybody's been talking about Chandrayaan, and I wanted to say why it's so important. I am a space entrepreneur. I've started the world's first and largest satellite television system. I was on the founding team of Iridium. By the way, we used your launchers. We were one of the first non-Indian companies to use your launchers. I started the first international launch service, a joint venture between Khrushchev in Russia and Lockheed Martin in the United States. I started Europe Online, which was also the world's first satellite broadband internet company. And today I'm the chair of Seraphim Space, which is the world's largest space tech and venture fund. And I'm also vice chair as the of North Star. So we're doing space situational awareness. So I think I can really tell you why what you are doing is so important. First of all, you've landed on the South Pole. This has taken a huge amount of R&D, innovation, and technology to get there. You have done it with your own inventions. You have done it with your own software. As a venture capitalist, you've done it for 73 million, so you're definitely investable. And of course, we are hoping now that the rover is taking its first steps, we are hoping that the images, which I think will be released tomorrow, will already start to show if there is ice on the South Pole, and if that ice then can be used for water, for oxygen, for fuel, to take us literally to, as the song says, to Mars. And this is incredibly important. Space exploration is the next frontier. I was just sharing with Chris that actually maybe the final frontier is the brain, but going to space, we will learn about so many things. And since we're talking about financing the climate transition, I know that you know that satellites, Earth observation, weather, being able to trend and to see the trends, unfortunately, with the warming of the climate, with the CO2 emissions, all of this comes from using satellites and sensors, Internet of Things, so that we can trace them and we can measure them. And when you can measure something, then you can make a difference. And so we are now, being able to have data that will help us learn what we need to do for precision agriculture, for pipeline monitoring, for extreme weather prediction, so that we can tell people before it happens, you've got to move. I always like to explain my life as going from using satellites for universal access to satellite television, satellite telecommunications, satellite mobile, satellite internet, to then accessing the universe. So indeed using Earth observation, satellites, weather satellites, geo information satellites, and now to basically doing networks for the universe. Because indeed, our theme for this conference, G20, is one world, one future, one family. I would also like to say that it's also one space, and that as we go further into space, the James Webb Telescope allows us to literally go to deep space. You, India, will be also leading us towards deep space. We will have deep space, we will have near space, and we will have the planet. And we will be able to create energy networks. So we were just talking about using the sun. And I'm done. Yep, I'm done. So just one last thing. We're using the sun to be able to, help the climate transition. We will also be able to use the sun from space-based solar power, and bring it down to Earth. This is just one of the things that is going to make our worlds better. And thanks to India, we're well on the way. Congratulations.
Thank you. That song was really a surprise, and a pleasant surprise, I may say. And it puts pressure on the rest of the panelists now.
They can dance.
No, maybe they can sing also. Let me now request Nick Dirks, the CEO of New York Academy of Sciences, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you. It is wonderful to be here at the B20 and to be in India. I'm not going to sing, which will be good for everyone here. But I am going to say that I will just match Candace in invoking my father, who came to a college in India in 1963, bringing me and my family with him. And it was because of that visit, during which he was advising the new principal about how to change the curriculum in a post-colonial India that led me to come back to India time and time again to do first my academic research and now to be here with all of you for this very inspiring conference on this extraordinary week for India and indeed for the world. I come, though, from a university background, and so I, in a panel like this, just want to emphasize at the outset that we won't have new technology, we won't have innovation, we won't have the kind of R&D needed to solve the major world problems that we're confronting if we don't support fundamental research. And the work that goes on in universities is critical to that. After all, it was quantum physics that led to the invention of the transistor, the semiconductor, the laser, MRI, GPS, and of course, the whole information revolution. It was the discovery of DNA in 1953 that led ultimately to the discovery of the capacity of mRNA to be used to create vaccines that we were so dependent on during the pandemic, and indeed to forge new technologies of gene editing around CRISPR-Cas9. All of these, and there are many more examples, show that without fundamental research, we won't have the kind of applied knowledge that we need for technological progress and advancement. Now, scientists are very good at collaboration across borders. Universities are not always so good. And one of the things that I've worked on during my career, including when I was chancellor of UC Berkeley, was precisely to move universities to work more closely together. The B20, the G20 is a perfect venue in which to I think, rededicate ourselves to the proposition that all research work needs to be shared. It needs to be done in institutional collaborations of a kind that will not only translate into more knowledge being produced, but having that knowledge then available for the kind of R&D innovation that is so critical for the future of our world. My current role at the New York Academy of Sciences includes trying to support fundamental research, but also translational research. It is something that I'm very proud of, that we are collaborating with Tata and Sons in order to have a new Tata Transformation Prize that will begin this year to reward work being done in areas around healthcare, agriculture and food security, and environmental sustainability that precisely translates fundamental research into applications that will be critical for these important domains in India's current situation and as it confronts the future. And again, that's an example of the kind of collaboration I think that brings all the benefits of university research to bear. Anyway, I'll make further comments later in the panel, but thank you, Chris, for convening us, and thank you for the work you did in the task force, which has produced the extraordinary recommendations, I think, that give us a real roadmap for working together in all of these areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And the role of basic research, this is something I also tell my colleagues in the industry, academia, that we need to make sure that industry and academia work together, industry invests more in research. We'll come back to that in the next round. And then, now let me request Fernando Cestaris de Rizzo to give his opening remarks. And by the way, Brazil is the next, hosts the next presidency for G20. Fernando.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, all. I want to first thank Chris for his leadership in this process. I think we did a great work, a lot of important things. I think a major concern we always had in this process is to be able to reach constructive deliverables in this process. And we were able to broaden the approach from the digital world also to the physical world. And this is an area that I want to touch here because the developing nations, they have demands that are necessary for basic sanitation, low-cost basic sanitation, for water, for energy security. And I think the manufacturing industry, as I'm a part of it, we are able to provide viable and scalable solutions to provide a low-cost conditions for these people, okay? I think when it comes to the G20, the major reason is to take care of the underprivileged people of these nations. And we should be able to drive all our efforts in this direction and to create a better world and a dignified life for these people. So a lot of the focus has been done in this direction. When we talk about Brazil, that will be the next hosting nation. We'll be talking a lot about biofuels, because in the meantime, we need to provide these conditions for the people. We have to take care of climate change. And we need to look in all potential opportunities. I always like to say that we waste a lot of energy. When we produce protein, we waste energy to the atmosphere because we're not able to capture the methane that we are producing as well. And this methane could be used as a fuel to provide better conditions for the people. So a lot of our efforts will be done in this direction. So the Brazilian Industry Confederation is absolutely committed to continue the India's legacy on these B20 forums. Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Fernando. You raised important points about one on the addressing the needs of the underprivileged. Second, energy conservation. Thank you. I will come back to that again. Now let me request Roshni Nada, Chairperson, HCL Technologies, to make her opening remarks.
Thank you. I wasn't part of this task force, but I was the co-chair of the Digital Transformation Task Force. So I'd just like to lay out to you of some of the recommendations that we made and how I think that they connect very well to innovation, R&D, technology, and most importantly, access. Our first recommendation was to bridge the digital divide by accelerating universal, future-proof, and transformational connectivity across all regions and geographies to increase digital penetration. Our second was to address digital literacy and skill gap by developing a minimum global standards framework. And the third was to promote enterprise transformation for MSME through access to sustainable finance, a globally recognized and sector-specific digital toolkit, and definitely a favorable regulatory environment. And then the fourth was to promote digital trust by developed harmonized cybersecurity standards and frameworks and bridge the cybersecurity skill gap. When I look at innovation and R&D, I think it's extremely important to realize that the digital platform enables sharing of innovation and R&D across various geographies. In the B20, in the G20 itself, I think different countries are in different cycles of technological development, especially in academia as well as skills. I also think that it's extremely important to focus on equitable funding. The funding across innovation and R&D is very different in different countries. I think Chris also mentioned in his opening remarks that when we talk about focus in research and how does equitable funding flow across different geographies, I think it's also very important, in addition to equitable funding for innovation and R&D and tech, are women in STEM at the center of such access and opportunity. I think that's going to be extremely critical. It's very critical now. It'll be extremely critical going forward. And that's one woman who clapped for me, other women. And thank you. We need more women to do that. And my last point would be, and this is something Fernando raised as well, around innovation and sustainability. But specifically in sustainability, looking at water as a resource and seeing what innovation and R&D and solutions which are developing across the world, including, of course, many in India, and how that is going to be extremely relevant and necessary for investment going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshni. It's amazing to see how many of the points that your task force discussed find actually their way into our task force. And I'll briefly talk about it after Baba Kalyani, my co-chair, makes his opening remarks before we go to the second round. And I also, I'm going to ask afterwards one question to each panelist, but then we will come to audience. So please ready with your questions or comments, but make it brief. But before that, let me request Baba to make his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chris. Uh, First of all, I think must take this opportunity to congratulate our colleagues in ISRO for the great uh, feat that they have generated in getting Chandrayaan-3 on the moon. Is by no means a simple feat. It's taken a lot of research, a lot of innovation, a lot of development, and a lot of learning from Chandrayaan-2 to get to Chandrayaan-3. And as Candice says, it provides us a pathway for a lot of new things to happen. Our task force on technology, R&D, and innovation, Chris mentioned our vision. We had two main visions in this. One was, how can we create technology-led affordable solutions and global scale business models? Now, the reason why these were the two, visions that were created is you look at India or you look at the South, it's an area with a huge population. Even India with 1.4 billion people, with such a large number of small and medium industries, their access to technology through the normal means that are used in the West is almost impossible. So it's great to develop technology in research labs, in education center. It's necessary, it's important. But I don't think that technology will reach the guys running a small-scale factory in some village in India. So we need to create some kind of democratization of technology business model, pretty much like the UPI. Government created a platform called UPI, and today thousands of Indians, and maybe even outside India, people without having to spend money, people without having to develop capability, are able to use a UPI and create a business. So we need now platform-based technologies to be created. And I'm glad that we have you on our panel, because you're the kind of people that must create these platforms. Government is creating another platform for the e-commerce business, which will also democratize the e-commerce business. But this is the focus of the mission that we have been talking about. The third area in our mission has been a lot of research is going on. A lot of individuals, the labs, places, research goes on, and it dies into something called the valley of death. And it dies in the valley of death largely because there is no funding. Now, here is where the government needs to come and fund to allow the research to come out of the valley of death, to get into a product, as Candice told me in her very good definition, that no VC will fund something at TRL level 6. It needs to be TRL level 9 to fund. Now, so this is the kind of problems we have. And these are the problems that were addressed. We had wonderful meetings with many people giving suggestions. And a lot of these suggestions have come in the book here. So this is my summation of what we have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Baba. one of our recommendations is to create a digital collaboration platform for global R&D. It's a deliverable that we believe we need to take forward. The purpose, the goal of this platform is for problems, for solutions, for people who would like to collaborate. Also, funds that are available for these projects, people can fund these projects, etc. So it's an online platform which will allow us to do all these things. Now I'm going to ask one question to each one of the panelists, and please be brief so that we can take audience questions. So Candace, my question is, you talked about space, but there are only 4 or 5 countries which have now the technology that allows. But how does the rest of the world benefit from the work that these 4 or 5 countries are doing? Or how should we set up a collaboration? Or maybe you have already, examples of this. Maybe you can talk about it.
Yes, thank you. So, just like Rosina said, water and collaboration. Water and space are dependent on international collaboration. And what we are seeing, just as we are seeing a democratization of education, of the digital world, we are seeing a democratization of space. The reason that we are seeing this is because we have the miniaturization of components that are coming, that are making space be much more accessible. We are seeing launchers that are becoming much cheaper, the cost of launching. And we are having these people inspire. So India is inspiring not only your youth, but all of the youth around the world. And actually, Chris, I'm working right now on something that I'm very worried about, and that is that we may be having a colonization of space. And so I'm working, I've created the manifesto for clean, accessible, equitable, and peaceful space. And the goal of this is to make certain that the emerging spacefaring nations around the world, that they have access to space, because, as I was saying, actually space can fulfill all of the SDGs, and it is these emerging nations which can now, because it's cheaper, they can also get into space. So there you go.
Thank you, Candace. Wonderful way of putting it. Nick, if I may, you talked about basic research and the need for basic research for progressing on many dimensions. Equally important, I would say, is communicating science. And New York Academy of Sciences plays a very important role, because unless we communicate this, funding is not going to come, youth are not going to join science courses and things like that. Maybe you can briefly talk about it, or you can talk about also the funding that's necessary to look at basic research or even translational research.
Thank you, Chris. I'll just talk briefly about both, but stop me when I go too long. The need for better communication about science is important, not just because I think we're at a moment of crisis around trust in science, but also because, of course, the challenges that we're confronting will, all of them, depend upon not just investing in science, but actually engaging in a process in which science will help provide the solutions that we need. Of course, we saw during the pandemic, at a time when it was almost miraculous how quickly vaccines were produced for the new, completely novel virus, that, of course, there was a worldwide problem around, more outside India than in India, of actually accepting scientific advice about the need to take the vaccine or other public health measures that were critical to combating the coronavirus. And in fact, in the United States, there's less trust in science now after the pandemic than there was before, precisely because of the kind of politicization that took place over science. So communication is important for scientists, and it's also important, I think, for public policy, government, and indeed industry to work together to try to find ways to advance. One of the problems, of course, in science is that it's a process. It's not a single truth or fact. When one says follow the science, one knows, of course, that it's going to be a circuitous route that one has to actually traverse to follow, because every time there's a new study, every time there's a new set of experiments, our knowledge will change, and sometimes it seems as if it's just zigging and zagging, and therefore doesn't inspire a great deal of confidence. So communicating the process, as well as the fact that when there is a consensus, and there are a lot of scientific consensus-based understandings of the world that still require further specification, clarification, and work, that nevertheless has a certain kind of rigor attached to it, and that has to do with climate change and the whole, well, the extent to which some of you saw how few American politicians in a particular party actually believe that humans have anything to do with climate change. But there is also the question, of course, around communication issues, how one funds the kind of, yeah, and that, of course, is ultimately going to require a real collaboration between the public and the private sectors. I'll just say that in a general way. In the US, NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and the National Science Foundation fund an enormous amount of science, but increasingly it's business, industry, and philanthropy that is beginning to really pick up the slack. And I think there are models, even in looking at the kind of history of funding over the last 10 years, that will be important as the B20 tries to figure out ways to enact the recommendations of the task force on technology innovation and research and development.
Thank you, Nick. Fernando, the question to you, you talked about the need to provide solutions to the underprivileged, to the 8 billion people in the world. For that, affordable solutions are required. And I strongly believe that we need to work collaboratively between developed and developing countries, higher cost nations and lower cost nations. And collaboration is also required in finding solutions. So for example, the Amazon forest provides the carbon sink that the entire world believes that it's important for us to preserve. Now, again, from your point of view, from Brazil's point of view, how do you see collaboration today, and how do you believe it should be, to address these issues of access to innovation, finding solutions which are at large scale? These are massive problems, but how will collaboration help us in this?
Thank you, Chris. I think what we learn in Brazil out of green technologies that are able to develop, increase, for example, soybeans. We produce soybeans in hot weather. That was a significant innovation development from Embrapa, which is our agency for development for agriculture. And these are technologies that should be explored around the world, right? We also are wasting a lot of energy when we produce beef, when we produce pork, when we produce grains, and we are wasting this energy. We have a number we use, like for every 10 porks, we produce 1 liter of diesel a day. So we could replace all the diesel we use in Brazil if we are able to capture this. And we are wasting, and this methane is going to the atmosphere. And I think part of what the work we are doing here, and to create a platform, a digital platform that we can share the ideas, share the innovation, and also try to find funding solutions Okay, we have an example in Brazil that we have the funding solutions, funding alternatives, and potential projects that we want to expand to the B20 next year to bring the ideas we came from this document moving forward. But really, I think we need to address these specific challenges and we need to focus a lot of energy in this direction. And I think I learned a lot of things in India. We can learn a lot of things in Brazil that we can share across the countries. And I think we're not doing a good job in this direction yet.
Thank you, Fernando. Roshni, very quickly, you talked about digital technologies. I believe India has leveraged digital technologies better than any other country. The India stack is a good example. We've also been pioneers in collaborative R&D because the entire IT services which you belong to, I belong to, has pioneered from the late 70s, early 80s, the global collaboration on R&D development and things like that. How do we take these learnings and how do we take this digital technology that we have developed and share it with the rest of the world? Any thoughts? Maybe you've discussed it in your task force also.
Yes, so I think, we discussed it in the beginning before this panel as well, that the one thing that we've also been able to do because of the development of the digital technology since the 70s to now is also this constant pipeline of talent and looking at not only skills that are needed today, but also having a forecast on future skills. And I think that's one reason why so many companies are also coming and setting up in India, because it's not just a young population, but it's a population which is at the frontier of what's happening in digital technologies. If I was to just apply this to my opening statements that I'd made on, let's say, women in tech or a focus on water and looking at the circular economies and what's happening in different parts of the world. For example, last year, and had we had this digital platform that we're talking about right now, we would have done it on the digital platform. But HCL launched a global fund, which was called the Aquapreneurs Innovation Initiative, which is to source the best in innovation and technology around freshwater conservation from around the world. And it's a $15 million fund, and we hope to find 10 aquapreneurs from across the world for the next 5 years. So by the end of the 5 years, we'll have 50 aquapreneurs. We announced our first set of aquapreneurs last year, and we've got 10. And it's amazing to see that we've had solutions from Argentina, from the US, from Singapore, from India, from Kenya, from Switzerland, across the world. And these are young entrepreneurs with amazing innovation. And the next step of the process is, how can we get all this innovation? I happen to be from India, is for them to come to India to pilot their solutions here and see if within this context they can scale. Because I think one of the other issues with global technology and skilling is it seems to be very contextualized. So the innovation is very specific to countries. But as we've discussed at the B20 and G20 is how can we take that to scale? So as you talk about digital technologies and I talk about skilling and training, so this is just one example where because they will be able to scale, not only will solutions, but the skills required for that kind of innovation will also get scaled. So I'm hoping that that's what one can learn from India, which is it wasn't just the technologies, but it was how widespread the skilling is. And it could be similar for other areas as well.
Sure. Baba, now I'm going to request you to come at the end. I'm going to open it up for audience questions. Okay, so we will start with the lady here in the front. Yeah, so I can see hands, but I can't see the faces. Then behind you, yeah, Yeah. So, so can the second mic be given to?
For efficiency. We can
Yeah.
line them up, assembly line. That's what Michigan taught us. My name is Seema Chaturvedi.
So please also direct the question. Who you want to answer the question?
Sure. My name is Seema Chaturvedi. I'm founder of a fund called AWE Funds, Achieving Women Equity. Thank you, Roshni, for shining a spotlight on the issue. Innovation, it is said, is promoted by diversity of thought, and yet less than 2% venture funding goes to women businesses or women-founded businesses. I understand that we can't solve every problem, but when the numbers are this stark, what can we, as leaders on the stage, and it can be anybody on the stage. Chris, I know you're a champion in venture investing, but Baba and Roshni and anybody else who wants to answer that, how do we make that trickle down a little more robust such that there are more women pulling their weight in something that they're very capable of, which is developing innovation that can scale and sustain?
So the question is, how can we direct more funds to women-led startups, create more women-led funds,
Correct.
and support creation of such funds, right?
Brilliantly paraphrased.
So Candace and Roshni, two women in our panel, if you can.
So I have created a number of funds, or shall we say SPVs, so special purpose vehicles, to which only have women, to invest in women-led companies. And I think this is the best way to do it. I never expect anybody to help me. I've never done any government projects. I've always only done privately financed projects. And you know the projects that I'm talking about. So, three very quick examples. One, I created ONSAT, Oceania Women's Network Satellite. We today have the world's only high throughput broadband internet in the Pacific called Pacific, bringing high throughput broadband internet to every single island in the Pacific. All of this was done by women, and the women on the ground are the presidents of the internet societies in those countries. I talked about one of my companies that is using the ISRO, the privatized launch now. It's called the Exploration Company. It's led by a woman, Helen Huby. I put together a group of women to invest in her. Barbara Belvisi, Interstellar Lab, she is doing pods, modules for life on Earth and life in space. She just won the NASA Deep Space Food Challenge. Here again, I put together a group of women to invest in her.
So for time, I'll go to the next question. So Madhur, you want to?
My name is Madhur Bajaj. I'm Vice Chairman of Bajaj Auto. As you know, many of the companies are going through, you can call it a recession or a downside. Now, they have very few resources and they have to make a choice whether to invest in marketing and sales, get revenue, get cash flow, save themselves from bankruptcy, or invest in technology, innovation, and R&D, which is a little more long-term. It comes after some time. But revenue comes, sales comes, if it happens immediately, and saves you from going down the drain. My vote would be to go and spend my resources, or few pennies that I've left, in marketing and R&D, marketing and sales. I would want any of the panelists to convince me that no, spending in technology, innovation, and R&D would be better than spending it elsewhere in any other function, including sales.
So
Thank you.
Madhur, it's not a snapshot in time, and in snapshot in time, you may have rightly, you're saying, your priorities will be different. But if you have money to invest, you need to think about long term, because organizations also have to be relevant, should have the right product, should have the most efficient and latest products, which only will come from innovation and R&D. So if you're not relevant, so you may survive in the short term, but may not be relevant in the long term. So you have to make a balance, and at different snapshots in time, definitely, you will, as the leader of the organization, make the right choices. And so right now, probably survival is the most important thing. Tomorrow, maybe you have money to invest, etc. But I'm saying, by and large, we need to make sure that our industry, and this is not just India, our industry is competitive, our industry has the latest products, our industry takes advantage of the latest technologies and stays relevant. I'm going to go to the next. We can discuss
just
outside.
a small follow-up question. How do you then explain, compared to other countries, the very, very low percentage of expenditure in technology, innovation, and R&D compared to the GDP or to the revenue of the company?
So-
How do you explain that?
Yeah, but it's not that the country doesn't have and our companies are not profitable. Right? So, even look at, the estimate of this 2% CSR itself is 40,000 crores or something like that. That's the 2% CS of the profits. So there are profits, and we should judiciously invest these things. Yeah, please.
Thanks, Chris. To the panel, my name is Kumar Bagrodia. I'm an applied neuroscientist. I run a company which uses brain-computer interface technology to help with mental health and brain enhancement. My question is to Mr. Dirks. So we are still in an environment where, although as the panel name suggests, technology, innovation, and R&D, but when we come to digital therapeutics or technology as a therapeutic, we are still being regulated and subject to conditions in an environment where it is assumed that health is equal to medicine and medicine is equal to chemicals in your body or surgery. But with all the innovation in digital therapeutics and technology as the therapeutic, how do you see this pan out where we're still not, subjected to old ways of thinking and regulation? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead?
I'll be brief because Chris has actually been working recently to support work in neuroscience as well. Some of the, and you probably know at my institution at Berkeley, just 3 days ago, there was a great breakthrough in terms of actually using neurotechnology to translate the lyrics of Pink Floyd, I think, into from someone who could not speak.
Yes.
But the as soon as you talk about the brain, of course, there are all these regulatory concerns that emerge because, of course, it's a new frontier. And I'll pass it to Chris to say more about it. My sense is that one of the big areas of necessary exploration is precisely to have people working in these fields translate better what they're doing to the kinds of people who are making regulatory decisions, because you're quite right, it's a very old model that's being used. But Chris?
Yeah. So very quickly, I will say, we need to work with the regulators. The regulators need to create sandboxes where these could be tested without creating larger harms and things like that. And that I see starting to happen. For example, Reserve Bank of India has created a sandbox to test fintech innovations and things like that. So in other areas also we need to do. Health is a little bit more difficult because the impact could be long term. So you may not catch it. So health, people are a little bit more careful because playing with lives. The lady there. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Pallavi Karnataka. I'm from Accenture, and my question is to Candice. Since yesterday, we've been hearing a lot of speakers emphasize on the responsible use of technology. And it is rather reassuring to hear from you that, you are looking for making space an equitable, clean arena. Given how we are, as India, taking stride onto the space tech sector, it would be rather interesting to hear from you what you stated, that, space can fulfill all the SDGs? Would request you to elaborate on, please.
Very
So-
briefly, Candice.
Yeah, very brief. So whenever I start anything, I never ever think about the technology. I only think, is this going to make the world better? And can I use whatever tool I've decided? And I think that that is really what India has to keep foremost in its mind, and obviously is doing. How can we make the world better? How can we make our next future sure? And from that will come the solutions.
So last question from the back. Yeah, very briefly, please.
Hi, my name is Royston Braganza. I'm the CEO of Grameen. We have 60 million women entrepreneurs at the bottom of the pyramid. And one of the things that Baba Kalyani talked about was the valley of death. We've talked about Pink Floyd to Frank Sinatra and the moon. How do we get funding to the base of the pyramid? Is there a way to catalyze, Chris, that you talked about the 2% CSR as a way to bring guarantees or other things for innovation that are at the bottom of the pyramid?
I'll answer. Yeah. So it's an interesting question, and definitely a challenge. But this is where the NGO sector plays an important role. Philanthropy plays an important role. Government plays an important role because, for example, in Karnataka, there's a program called Elevate. Under Elevate, they are giving grants this year, 130 crores. That's about 1,300 million rupees to different categories of startups or innovators, which include women-led, minority-led, small entrepreneurs or small ideas and things like that, from tier 2, tier 3, rural. So there are multiple programs. Similarly, there are, I know of funds that are supporting farmers. There are. Now, the venture capital industry is a very different industry. They fund risky projects, very highly scalable. So that's a different category of asset, and you should look at other source for addressing these. We can discuss outside because I need to close. The time is up.
Thank you.
We will discuss outside. Now, thank you all. In a wonderful session, we could go on. And I want to thank all my co-chairs sitting here, panelists sitting here, and all the 170 people who worked with us. And I'm going to hand it over to my co-chair, Baba Kalyani, who in many a time actually convinced of our deliverables that this should be accepted. So he is the best person to conclude.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I think we've had a fairly varied discussions on many topics, right from space to technology to innovation to science in institutions to things like what Roshni said, creating entrepreneurs for water on a worldwide basis, and my friend from Brazil trying to use what Brazil can do in terms of solving many of its own problems. The answer really lies in that sentence, that all of us, in no matter which country we live in, we need to find what is the best for our people. We need to find where do we have the best ideas within our system. How do we use those ideas to solve the problems by innovating new things, new processes, new ideas, and making life better? Nothing is going to go away in a snap of a finger. I think it's a long process, but in any society, and especially in societies today, with so much of change happening, whether it's the change of the digital world, the change of the artificial intelligence systems coming in, Chat GPT, AI coming in, and all kinds of different things that are happening in the world. Change is one constant factor that is going to remain no matter what we like to say. And change can only happen if you invest in innovation, if you invest in innovative thinking, if you invest, it doesn't mean that everywhere we have to put a lot of money to do things. Sometimes you can do things by using common sense also. And sometimes you can do things by using each other's examples and by sharing information. So I think we have to create a world where technology, innovation, R&D is something that we can share with each other, and we can create a better world for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan, and our panelists, Candice Johnson, Fernando Rizzo, Baba Kalyani, Roshni Nadar Malhotra, and Nicholas Dirks. We've got gifts for everyone. If I could request Mr. Gopalakrishnan to please do us the honors of presenting small tokens of appreciation to our panelists. It's together, so there are two things that go to each person, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're going into our next session, so our speakers are already here. Please be seated.